There is a chair in the corner of my room that no one has ever sat in. Not my husband. Not my children. Not my grandchildren, even when they were small and the floor was cold and there was nowhere else. I told them it wasn't for sitting. They listened. Everyone always listened to me, and I thought that meant something. I am 99 years old. I have outlived my husband by 18 years, 2 of my children, and every friend I ever had. I have been called strong my entire life. Reliable. A good woman. The kind of person others point to and say, "She never complained," not once. They meant it as a compliment. I accepted it as one. I want to tell you something that took me 9 decades to understand, something I could not have said out loud even 10 years ago, because I had not yet found words for it that didn't feel like betrayal. Not betrayal of my family. Betrayal of the story I had told myself about who I was. I was not strong. I was silent. And for most of my life, I did not know there was a difference. I was born in 1925 in a small town in Ohio. The third of 5 children. My mother had a saying she repeated so often it stopped sounding like words and became something closer to weather: "Good girls don't make trouble." She didn't say it cruelly. She said it the way you'd say "don't touch the stove," a simple protection. As fact. I learned early that the highest thing a woman could be was uncomplaining. Patient. Steady. You absorb difficulty the way good soil absorbs rain, quietly, without fuss, and in service of something else growing. I was 19 when I married Gerald. He was 24, recently returned from the Pacific, thin in a way that never quite went away. I did not choose him the way people talk about choosing now, with lists and feelings and conversations about what each person needs. I chose him the way you choose the path that is already cleared. His family knew my family. He was decent. He did not drink. My mother approved. That felt like enough. That felt, in 1944, like more than most women got. What I did not say, what I did not even think clearly until I was past the age of thinking changes anything, was that I felt nothing when he proposed. Not joy. Not fear. A kind of mild relief, the way you feel when a decision gets made for you and you no longer have to hold the question. We moved into a house on Carpenter Street. I painted the kitchen yellow because I read somewhere that yellow kitchens are cheerful. I did not particularly want a cheerful kitchen. I don't know what I wanted. That is precisely the problem. The children came. 4 of them in 7 years. I loved them. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm telling you is not a story about a woman who felt nothing. I felt everything. I simply never said it, never acted from it, never once let what I felt determine what I did. Feeling was weather. Duty was the house you lived in regardless. I cooked 3 meals a day for 41 years. I ironed Gerald's shirts on Sunday evenings while he watched television in the other room. I went to church every week and smiled at people whose names I knew but whose lives I had no real part of. I was present everywhere and nowhere. I was, as everyone agreed, a wonderful woman. And the chair. I bought it in 1962 at an estate sale. Pale blue, with curved wooden arms and a cushion that had faded from something brighter. I don't know why I wanted it. Something about it felt like mine, which was unusual enough that I noticed it. I brought it home and put it in the corner of the living room, and something in me said, "This one is not for anyone else." I never sat in it either. In 1971, my daughter Ruth came home from her first year of college, changed in the way that only a year away from home can change a person, looser somehow, louder, taking up more space in her room than she used to. She had opinions about things I had never thought to have opinions about. She argued at the dinner table. She laughed at the wrong moments. She said what she wanted before she checked whether anyone wanted to hear it. I watched her and felt 2 things simultaneously, and I remember this clearly because it was one of the few times in my life I caught myself feeling something before I could stop it. The first thing was pride, quiet, private, the kind you don't say out loud because you can't explain it without explaining too much. The second thing was grief. Not for her. For the version of me that never existed. I told her to lower her voice at dinner. She did. She always did, eventually. I thought I was teaching her something important about how the world works. I know now I was teaching her how I had learned to disappear. Gerald retired in 1983. He was 63. Suddenly he was in the house all day, in the kitchen when I was cooking, in the living room when I was trying to have the only 2 hours of silence I had built my day around. I reorganized my entire life around his presence without once saying, "This is hard for me." Without once thinking I had the right to say it, a neighbor, Dorothea, asked me once. We were standing in her garden in what must have been 1985. She was cutting back her roses. She asked me if I ever got tired of having Gerald home all day. She said it lightly, woman to woman, the way you offer someone a door they can walk through if they want. I said, "Oh, it's fine. I'm used to it." Dorothea looked at me for just a moment longer than the answer required. Then she nodded and went back to her roses. She died in 1991. I still think about that moment in her garden. I think about it more than I think about most things that actually happened to me. That was a door. I did not walk through it. After Gerald died in 2001, my children worried about me being alone. They called more often. They visited on rotation, organized without telling me, which I discovered only when I noticed the pattern. They treated me gently, the way you treat something fragile, something that might break if handled without care. I was not fragile. I had never been fragile. But I had also spent so long being handled carefully that I no longer knew how to say, "You don't have to do that, I am fine." I am, in fact, more myself right now than I have been in decades. Because that was the truth I could not say. Gerald had been a decent man. A quiet man. He had never hurt me. And still, the 18 years after his death were the first years of my adult life in which I woke up in the morning and the day was simply mine. No one's shirts to iron. No one's schedule to build my hours around. No one to not complain to. I was 81 years old before I had a day that belonged entirely to me. I did not know what to do with it. I sat in the kitchen for a long time, then I got up and made 1 cup of coffee instead of 2, and I stood by the window and drank it while it was still hot, which I had never done before because there had always been something else that needed doing first. It was the best cup of coffee I had ever had. I did not tell anyone that. It felt too large to explain and too small to justify explaining. I moved into the care facility 3 years ago. 96 years old, a bad fall in the hallway. My daughter Patricia standing in my kitchen with that look on her face that meant the decision had already been made and we were only now having the conversation. I did not argue. I never argued. I packed what they told me to pack and I let them carry the boxes and I said thank you to everyone who helped. I brought the chair. They put it in the corner of my room, same as it had always been. Same pale blue, though the cushion had been recovered twice by then. The staff walked around it without asking about it. My grandchildren, when they visited, sat on the edge of my bed or pulled over the small stool from the bathroom. No one sat in the chair. The pattern held without me having to enforce it anymore. Some things, once established, simply continue. It was a Tuesday in February. I remember because the window had that particular gray February light that makes everything look like an old photograph. A young nurse came in to check my blood pressure. Girl, really, she couldn't have been more than 25, with dark hair pulled back and the kind of efficient kindness that comes from doing difficult work without losing yourself in it. She wrapped the cuff around my arm. We sat in silence for a moment. Then, not unkindly, not as part of any procedure, just the way one person sometimes speaks to another when the room is quiet enough, she looked at me and asked, "What made you happy? In your life, I mean. What was the thing that made you happiest?" She was making conversation. She was being kind. She had no idea she had just asked me the one question I could not answer. I opened my mouth. And nothing came. Not because I was emotional. Not because the memories were too many to choose from. But because I was searching genuinely, rapidly searching through 99 years of living, and I could not locate a single moment that I had chosen purely because it brought me joy. Every happy memory I found had an asterisk. I was happy at Ruth's wedding, but I had spent the week before it managing everyone else's anxiety. I was happy when the grandchildren were small, but I was also exhausted in a way I never admitted. I was happy sometimes in the kitchen, but the kitchen was also where I had spent 40 years in service of other people's hunger. The nurse was still looking at me, gently, waiting. I said, "I made a good life." She smiled and wrote something on her clipboard and moved on to the next room. I sat with what I had said. A good life. Not a happy one. Not a chosen one. A good one. As if goodness and happiness were the same thing, as if I had ever believed they were, or as if, somewhere between 19 and 99, I had simply stopped checking. The gray February light sat in the window. The chair sat in the corner. And I understood, for the first time with the full weight of it, That I had spent my entire life being good for other people and had never once asked myself the question that girl had just asked me. No one had ever asked me before. Or perhaps they had, and I had answered too quickly to notice. There is a word people use for women like me. They call us selfless. They say it with admiration, the way you describe a rare and valuable thing. She was so selfless. She always put others first. She never asked for anything. I want you to understand what that word actually means when you pull it apart and look at it honestly. It means without a self. Not generous. Not loving. Not strong. Without a self. And somehow we built an entire language of praise around that absence and called it virtue. I was not selfless because I was good. I was selfless because I was afraid that wanting something for myself would make me difficult. Afraid that saying this is hard would make me a burden. Afraid that if I took up too much space, asked for too much, needed too much, the approval that I had built my entire sense of safety upon would quietly withdraw. So I made myself small. I made myself useful. I made myself, above all, uncomplaining. And people called me strong for it. That is the thing I need you to hear. The people who never complain are not the strongest people in the room. They are the loneliest. Because silence is not the same as peace. Silence, practiced long enough, becomes a kind of solitary confinement you carry with you everywhere, into your marriage, into your kitchen, into the room where a young nurse asks you a simple question and you discover you have no answer. I want to give you something you can use. Not wisdom wrapped in beautiful language. Something plain and immediate. Ask yourself today, not someday, ask yourself this: in the last week, did I do one single thing purely because it brought me joy? Not because it was useful. Not because someone needed it, not because it was responsible or appropriate or expected, but because I wanted it. If the answer comes easily, hold on to that. Protect it. If you are searching the way I searched in that gray February room, then you already know what I am telling you. And you still have time I did not have. That is not a small thing. That is everything. I know what you are thinking. Because I fought it for 80 years. You are thinking, but my responsibilities are real. My family needs me. This is not the season for putting myself first. Later, when things settle, when the children are older, when work is less demanding, when there is more time. Later. I want to tell you what later looks like. Later looks like a Tuesday in February. Later looks like a young woman with a clipboard asking you a question you cannot answer. Later looks like 99 years old in a chair you bought for yourself and never once sat in. There is a particular kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. I was surrounded my entire life by Gerald, by 4 children, by grandchildren and neighbors and church committees and school events and decades of dinners and holidays and carefully maintained relationships. I was never alone. And I was lonely in a way I cannot fully describe even now. Lonely for myself. For the woman I might have been if someone had told me early enough that my own happiness was not a luxury to be earned through sufficient sacrifice. It was simply part of being alive. It was, in fact, the point. No one told me that. And I did not tell my daughters. And I watched Ruth lower her voice at my dinner table in 1971 and I called it a lesson. That is the one that stays with me. Not Gerald's death. Not the fall in the hallway. Not any of the large, nameable losses. Ruth, lowering her voice. Because in that moment I had a choice to let her be loud and alive and fully herself, or to send her down to the shape that made dinner more comfortable. And I chose comfort. I chose the appearance of a well-ordered table over the reality of a daughter who felt safe enough to take up space. I have 4 children. I love them completely, and I taught every one of them, by example, that the way to be good is to be quiet. That the way to be loved is to be useful. That wanting things for yourself is something you do privately, carefully, and with some shame. I did not mean to teach them that. That is perhaps the worst part. I did not mean to. This morning I asked the nurse a different one, not the girl from February. I asked her to move the chair to the window. She did it without question. It took her 11 seconds. I counted. I sat in it for the first time in 62 years. The cushion is firmer than I expected. The light came in at an angle across my hands, which are not the hands I recognize as mine, spotted and thin, the hands of someone very old, but they were warm in the sun, and I let them be warm, and I did not get up to do anything useful, and no one needed me, and the morning was quiet. It was not a revelation, it was not healing. It was just a chair by a window, and an old woman sitting in it, and sunlight that did not ask anything of anyone. I sat there for 20 minutes. In 99 years, it was the first thing I ever did purely because I wanted to. Think about what you are saving yourself for.